now do a week early. No, do a week later. Okay, that's the last class. Okay. If you got any questions about it, come and see me. If you question my drafting ability, that's a tough. That's the way those maps are. Okay. Some other things. Now, it mentions in here that the airline guidelines for report preparation are in the library. And I put them in your session. That's what this is. This is from the next course that was due a year ago, August. We're going to go with this the way it is for the purpose of the paper, not necessarily in terms of supporting it across the board. Next week, in confrontation, I'm not going to be in the opposition. I'm just going to be there. Okay? So you guys that are the bottom two on the list, have got to shoot these archaeologists down, okay? And I'll put it on your back. If you don't, hopefully the archaeologists will get a better grade than you day. Anyway, just one other bit of information, and that is that in New York State, the New York Archaeological Council is suing the Environmental Protection Agency and the State Historic Preservation Officer in terms of a number of sewage projects up there, which the SHPO said that that there was going to be no impact on the project without any archaeological study, nothing. And so the New York Archaeological Council has taken them to court, or at least filed an injunction. As a result of this, the suit against EPA and the SHPO, and therefore the city, a number of the cities have, regardless of the fact that the SHPO said that there didn't need to be surveys, a number of the cities have done surveys and have either realized that yes, there is no impact, or have committed themselves to doing mitigation. And according to Tom King, who runs the New York Archaeological Council, it appears that EPA, or at least the state of New York, and the SHPO are going to attempt to settle out of court, and the SHPO now is requiring archaeological studies on all such projects. So there have been some breakthroughs in that area recently. That's what the letter from King came yesterday. Okay, the format this evening is this. We're going to have the speakers talk, and then we're going to take a break. We're going to come back for questions. So if you got questions, keep track of them, and we'll come back to them. This is Dr. Dee Dee Green, and she is the archaeologist for the southern region of the U.S. Forest Service, and she's going to talk first. Let's see. And I guess Larry Banks, who is an archaeologist for the Corps of Engineers in the Tulsa District, and in the Southwest Division here in Dallas, he's going to talk. And then this is Jim Warren with the Soil Conservation Service, the only one of his kind in the nation, archaeologist with SDS, and he'll talk third, and then we'll take a break. So, Reed, could you close that door? Before
I begin, let me give you a bit of background about myself. I'm now the regional archaeologist in the southern region of the Forest Service. I've held that job for about 4 months, and my background is completely academic. I had no other job with the federal agency. Last year, I taught a course similar to this one, and got a point of view which was different from that I got in the last 4 months with the Forest Service. So my talk then is divided appropriately enough into 3 parts. The organization of the Forest Service generally, the organization in Region 8, which that's what this region is, Texas falls in Region 8. And that will give you an example of regional organization as opposed to nationwide organization of the Forest Service. And thirdly, the archaeology in the Forest Service and the law. I have a map up here of Region 8 and the forest in Region 8. I don't know how well you can see it from your view, but you can see that there are forests in each of the 13 states. It's not the largest region for the Forest Service, certainly ties with Region 9 for a number of states. And then the 4 forests in Texas. You might want to take a closer look at this, particularly those of you who've been working on these forests in Texas. named regions within the Forest Service for the United States, but there are only actually 9 regions. One of them was dropped out, and it was never renamed, so Region 7 doesn't exist. Region 1 is the northernmost region for the Forest Service and is Montana, parts of Idaho, the eastern part of Washington, and North Dakota. Region 2 is the Rocky Mountain region and includes states such as Colorado, Nebraska, South Dakota, and part of Wyoming. Region 3 is the southwestern region and has only Arizona and New Mexico, but there are quite a number of national forests there. So there's quite a bit of land in that. Number 4 is the Intermontane region, which is part of Idaho, Nevada, Utah, and part of Wyoming. Region 5 has only one state, and that's California. And there's quite a bit of national forest land in California. 6 is the Pacific Northwest, which is Oregon and Washington for the state. There is no Region 7. What happened was that there used to be a Region 7, and that land was redistributed, and part of it was put into Region 9, and part of it was put into Region 8. Well, Region 8 is the one that we're in. It's called the Southern Region, and has 13 states in it. And for your information, they are Virginia, all of the states of Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, Texas, and Oklahoma. And I've gotten to the forest of about half of that in the 4 months. That means I've been in my base is Atlanta. I've been in Atlanta about half the time I've been with the Forest Service and out in the field about half the time. Region 9 is either the Eastern region or the Great Lakes region, and it includes Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, all the way over to the East Coast. That's Maine, New Hampshire, and so on. Michigan is in Region 9. And finally, Region 10 is Alaska. And then there's the Washington office. So for the national organization then, there are the 10 or actually 9 regions throughout the United States and the Washington office. Now, you might be interested in the names of the regional archaeologists in these different regions. Number 1, Region 1 is Floyd Sheriff. He has been there. He's from the University of Minnesota and has been there for maybe just a couple of weeks longer than I've been in my job, so say 4 to 5 months. Region 2 was open for a regional archaeologist, and as far as I know, it's not yet filled. That's the Denver office. And they were advertising for a regional archaeologist. It's a rather interesting story. They were advertising about 6 months ago, and then the regional archaeologists there decided that they didn't need a regional archaeologist, so the job closed. People are applying and so on. And then, for a reason I don't know, the regional archaeologist, or rather the regional forester, apparently decided that they did need an archaeologist after all, and the job opened again. And all this was within about a month. So I saw the advertisement come through a couple of months after I'd been in Atlanta, and I don't know that they filled the position yet. I don't even know who's applying. Region 3, the regional archaeologist is D.S. Green. Not to be confused with myself, my nickname is Dee Dee. I haven't got his email, he got my email. Region 4, the regional archaeologist is Evan DeBlois. Region 5 is Don Miller. He was the first regional archaeologist hired by the Forest Service. 6, Leslie Wilderson, the other woman archaeologist with the Forest Service now. Region 8 is myself, a regional archaeologist. 9 is not yet filled. They're looking for a woman archaeologist with equal rights employers. Region 10 is Douglas Weaver. I don't know him at all. I don't know his background at all. He's probably, since he's in Alaska, he's probably out of the University of Alaska, but I really don't know. Now, Interestingly enough, and unlike the Park Service, our Washington office has no professional archaeologist. The person who handles the cultural resources in the Washington office is named Gordon Sanford, and he's in the Recreation Division, which is the division that I'm in. I'll tell you about that arrangement in just a minute. But at any rate, then in the Washington office, when I want to find out something that Washington can help me with, I call up Gordon Sanford, but he doesn't have an archaeological background. Okay, now, the functional organization within the Forest Service. There are a number of different functional divisions. Now, let's take, for example, in Region 8. Within the Forest Service, there are divisions such as engineering, there's fire management. The Forest Service is fighting fires all the time. Well, there is indeed a fire management division, and people actually specialize. Of course they would, but you don't think about this. You don't get into it. Their whole professional specialization is in the management of fire. Law enforcement, land. There's the information division. There is range timber and wildlife, land use planning, watershed and minerals, and recreation. In most of these regions, archaeology or cultural resource management falls under the recreation division, or under the area of recreation. The single exception is in California, where, and in Alaska, it's in plants, it's in land use planning. In California, they hired an archaeologist first in the lands division, and that's Don Miller, and he stayed in the lands from then on. He's not switched over to recreation, although the rest of us are in recreation. Now, let me tell you a bit about the structural division. That is how we break down in terms of the regional office and different divisions of that. First is the Washington office, and then under that would be the regional office. We abbreviate these as WO, then of which there are the 9 different regional offices, the ROs as they come out. In some regions, for example, Region 3, which is Arizona, New Mexico, and Region 4, the Inner Mountain region, they have zones. Now, we don't have this in Region 8, the one that we're in. So in some of them, they'll have a zone office. And then, if there is a zone office, we go then to the supervisor, the forest supervisor's office. In cases where there isn't that zone office, such as ours, when we're in, we go straight to the regional office and to the supervisor's office, or the forest supervisor. That's not SO, it's not state office. I mean, that's state. They're part of the state office. That's the supervisor's, forest supervisor's office. However, it so happens that in most cases, all of the forests in a state will be under one supervisor. They'll call him the forest supervisor, even though he may have, as in Texas, 4 different forests which are under him. So here in Texas, we've got the Sam Houston, the Davy Crockett, the Sabine, the Angelina. Those are all given different names, different forest names, those 4. But their administration, as far as this SO office, comes from the supervisor's office in Lufkin. So we really have got 4 main forests to deal with this. Okay. They call him the forest supervisor, although he's not a single forest supervisor. And then the district office is under that. And for say, I don't know how many districts there are in say San. Anyone know all that? 2. Okay, that's about what they are in most of them. 2 to 4 districts, something like that. So for Texas, this is the kind of organization that we have, going from the Washington office to the regional office, to the supervisor's office, to the different district offices. And each district office say not everybody with Forest Service green on is a ranger. There's only one ranger for each district office, and he's the guy with the clout for that particular district. He, in a way, is kind of like the old patrol system in that he's responsible for all of the personnel, all of the land problems, all of the construction, any relations between the townspeople and the district or the forest at all. He's responsible for any public relations work and so on. So he has the entire district under his responsibility. Okay, now the district ranger is also the person who's closest to on the ground. That is the project. Projects all ultimately go through the district ranger. All archaeological projects ultimately go through the district ranger. So that if you're doing work on the forest, your contact is really the district ranger as a very key and critical person. Sometimes we forget that. Sometimes archaeologists tend to deal with the regional archaeologist who may be in a regional office and forget that the main contact is the district ranger. But the district ranger can throw you off the land if he wants to. This has not happened with any archaeologists. This has happened with some other people who didn't have a proper contact with the district ranger. Then next in line, as far as being on the ground and knowing what goes on and controlling the money on the ground, is the forest supervisor's office. Now, when you get up to the regional office with the Forest Service, this is mainly for support, information, recommendation, advice. So, well, and then beyond that, the Washington office is even more advice and coordination. So, and this is something that I just learned in joining the Forest Service. I didn't realize it was this way. The people who, I don't know, I can't say this, let me say that there's some controlling of money everywhere along the line. Because, for example, when Congress allocates a certain amount of money to the Forest Service, the Washington office takes a certain percentage in order to run their office. And to run their office. The regional, then the rest of it goes down. The regional office takes a certain percentage to run their office and any money for any kind of project out of the regional office. Okay. And the remainder goes down to the supervisor's office. And it's there that there's really the responsibility of giving a certain amount of money. How are we going to, all right, give it a certain amount of money for timber wildlife? How are we going to allocate this for timber and wildlife management? Give a certain amount of money for recreation. Are we going to clean out the toilets? Are we going to put in the parking lot? Are we going to open a new visitor interpretation center or a museum? So it's the supervisor's office then that the monies are allocated for projects of certain nature projects, certain kind of projects. And then, after they take off a percentage of all this filtering down, they take off a percentage to run the supervisor's office, then the remainder will go to the district offices. And the ranger then has the responsibility of running all those projects, given the amount of money that he has been given in that particular year. Looking at it going from the other way up, the ranger, in a way, makes a contract with the supervisor's office for that year to cut so many board feet of timber, to put in so many roads, to put in such and such recreational facilities, to manage so many acres for wildlife and game refuge. And then the supervisor's office will, in a way, collect all of these contracts from the district offices. The supervisor makes a contract with the regional forester. The head of here is the regional forester. The head of here is the forest supervisor. And the head of here is the district ranger. So the forest supervisor makes a contract with the regional archaeologist that so much board feet of timber will be cut off of these districts and so on, and all of the different forests under his supervision. The regional forester makes a contract with the chief, that is called, in all capital letters, not just capital do them. If they don't do them, it goes on their record. And then if they wish to advance in jobs, their entire record is looked at and said, well, he did do this or he didn't do that, and so on. Okay, so you can see that it's fairly important to perform the jobs which one has said that one is going to do during the year on the farm. Okay, now, in archaeological organization, then, to turn to the matter of doing the archaeological work, there are at least three, and perhaps some of you can think of other ways, but at least three ways which are commonly used to get the archaeology done in the forest. One is to contract with outside organizations, such as the contract which the State Forest in Texas had made with SMU to do archaeological work. In Texas, we contracted with Texas A&M too. The other is to hire archaeologists, professional archaeologists, to hire professionally trained archaeologists, hire professional archaeologists. And you can call that in-house archaeologists if you will, if you want. Now, professional archaeologists conceivably could be hired, in theory, could be hired at all of these levels. And at the zone level too, for that matter. A third way of getting the archaeology done to a certain extent is to train people who are now in the Forest Service to do some archaeological work. Now, some will vary, because if you take someone who's in the Forest Service now and is interested in archaeology, as I've run across some people in the forest who are interested in archaeology and want to go on, get an MA in archaeology, you can train them then all the way up to the MA level or beyond, if necessary. Or, at the other end, so we're talking about 2 or 3 years or whatever of training for a person who's already employed by the Forest Service. On the other end, you might offer a 1-week awareness program in which we could wind up with what might be called technician. Technician system has been used for landscape managers. Archaeology in the Forest Service, archaeology is the last comer, kind of like the ethnic groups arriving in the United States. We're the last ones in the Forest Service, and we've only come the last couple of years. Before us, the new introduction was landscape architects. And landscape architects took about 10 to 20 years to filter in. Now they have a rather tight organization in the Forest Service, so that there are landscape architects on every forest. And most people who go out in the field, whether they're engineers or soil scientists or whatever, have a 1 or 2 week awareness program or awareness training in landscape management. So this is a third thing that we might do in the Forest Service for training people who are now employed by the Forest Service. But the thing is, of course, this wouldn't accomplish, in no way would it accomplish the kind of information which is needed for an evaluation study or anything to really fulfill the laws, and you all have probably learned the laws that archaeology needs to be done by federal agencies. It's more simply an awareness program for the guys out there on the bulldozer. He comes across a skull. He knows at least the stop. Hopefully he knows more, but he knows at least the stop. That it might be a cultural resource, and that this is protected by federal law. Okay, the archaeological organization does vary between different regions, and I want to give you just a few examples here. I'm going to sort of combine 3 and 4, region 3 and 4, which is the region 3 is the Southwest, that's Arizona, New Mexico. Region 4 is the Intermountain region. So, and I'm going to contrast these as we go along and show you how the regional archaeologists, and we different regions have made use of these three different methods to get the archaeology done on the forest. In region 3 and 4, I'm kind of combining those because they're really very similar. They use a mix of in-house archaeology and contracts. Now, in region 3 and 4, there's quite a bit of in-house archaeology. They have hired professional archaeologists at the regional level, but also the zone level, and some forests have hired regional archaeologists, so that there's an archaeologist on the forest, and at least one district has hired a regional archaeologist. That's really getting down pretty far to have someone at the district level. Okay, the question is, well, what is a professional archaeologist? At the regional level, people all have a doctorate. At the forest level and the zone level and the district level, well, certainly the forest and the zone, MA is what people have. And then a BA and an MA, I can't quite remember which is, the BA or MA at the district level. So there, in those states, in those two regions, they have hired more professional, well, as many professional archaeologists really are doing the work as in any other region. They have also trained Forest Service personnel, people who are not professionals in archaeology at all, people who simply showed an interest. They may have been foresters. Chances are they were. Chances are they have their degree in forestry and showed an interest in archaeology. And so as Dee Dee goes from forest to forest talking to people, he'll identify those who are interested in archaeology and he'll start training them in an informal way. He'll take them out to the field with them and talk to them about the sites that they are passing, what they're doing, the law, and so on. So by informally getting people out of the field, and he is identifying those who are interested in archaeology, and he then, when he feels that they have a good training, when he feels confident about their abilities in the field, he will let them do some of the projects, and then will let them write what he calls an archaeological clearance for a project. Now this is an archaeological clearance for a project refers to, let's say there's going to be a land exchange, 100 acres is going to be exchanged between the Forest Service and a private party. That land needs to be surveyed so that these people may do the archaeological survey. And then, however, he is ultimately responsible for the quality of the work. So in that way, then there is monitoring by a professional archaeologist. However, in those regions, they'll also contract for the large acreage project. Region 5 offers a good contract. So Region 5, which is California, they do have professional archaeologists at the regional office support, Don Miller, and on some of the forests and some of the district offices. But they have a very active technician program where they will train people who are in the Forest Service, no professional archaeology courses or anything of that nature. They'll offer a 2-week training program. And then these people whose main responsibility may be in engineering, they may be landscape architects, soil scientists, geologists, whatever. They also are asked to devote at least part of their time to doing the archaeological work, the surveys, preparatory to a construction project on forest land. In Region 5, they try to have one per ranger district, one per district, one of these technicians per district. There are a number of potential problems in this. One of the, you can think of yourself, probably with two of the problems. One is that a 1 to 2, or I'll say a 2-week or a 4-week, if you want to think anyway, a 2-week training program is in no way sufficient to by professional archaeologists. What they're doing is that the regional archaeologist, or perhaps the one on the forest, depending on what forest they're working on, is the professional archaeologist. And this person then will, say it's the regional archaeologist, will read the report written by one of these trainees. And he will say, I feel this report is valid one, correct, or I will suggest that the person go out and do some more field work. But there's still the problem of whether a student training program is sufficient to teach someone, even if they have an interest in archaeology, to do a survey. A second problem is that these guys are hired as engineers, soil scientists, geologists, or whatever. And one thing we're learning is that they just don't have time to do all of the archaeology that needs to be done in order to handle the Forest Service project. It's going to take at least a full-time archaeologist, certainly on the forest, if not on every district. But these people are being asked to divide their time to do more than one job. So those are some of the major problems that is developing with that technician program as it is set up in Region 5. You can set up a different kind of technician program. You can set up one where you say, okay, you want to build a road through here. There are 3 possible alternatives for right-of-way. Let's let someone who's been trained as a technician go out and look for the presence of sites to see if there's any one of these right-of-ways where there are no sites that he can find at least. He's not evaluating the sites. He's simply looking for the presence of cultural material of any kind. The forest land manager, whether he's a supervisor or a district ranger or whatever, will probably say, okay, we find 2 of them to find cultural resources, 1 to find no cultural resources, then we will tentatively say we're going to put our right-of-way through that one where there are no artifacts found. And then after that, call in a professional archaeologist to do the survey and to evaluate the significance of any sites that are found. So that way a technician program can be used, and still the professional archaeologist is called in at the final stage where a project is being proposed and one wants to evaluate any sites which is found significant sites. In Region 8, which is us, by contrast, now we're doing all contrast. There's no archaeological project going on by in-house archaeologists in Region 8. Now, as time goes on, we may be hiring archaeologists at the forest supervisor level. I don't know, I emphasize may with a capital M. Because remember from what I was telling you about the way the money flows, the money comes through the regional office and we can recommend, but the ceilings or the job positions actually come from the forest supervisor's office. So it's up to them to decide whether they think they need an archaeologist at the forest supervisor's office or whether they wish to go ahead and contract. It'll probably break down on the money figure, you might guess. It'll probably break down on a cost-benefit figure and also a matter of efficiency. Certainly cost figure and a matter of the efficiency of getting archaeological work done. But at this time, then, we're strictly contracting out jobs in the regional office. As far as archaeology in the Forest Service and the law, now if you have a background, all of you I understand are well familiar with the to spend on archaeological projects, and the reason they weren't leaving is because they were uninformed, bullheaded, or perverse. So I was going to try to change all of this. The first thing I learned was, in actual fact, they are tight on money. You hear this a lot, but they're not just mouthing it. The fact is that they really are tight on money. Congress is tight with its allocation for federal agencies. And then, secondly, you hit them with the fact, but look, here's the law. I mean, after all, you don't want to be outside the law. And I guess it was the second day when about 3 people pointed out to me that every day the Forest Service, at least, is in non-compliance with some law. Every day they wake up, they're outside the law. Some law, because there's so many laws which apply to the activities which the Forest Service carries on. So just to say you're outside the law, they'll say, yeah, well, we're also outside of this one, this one, and this one. So, okay. So in the Forest Service, it's a matter of not complying with cultural resource law immediately, but a matter of trying to work toward compliance with the law, and hopefully within several years' time to be in a close to a full compliance with the law. And I emphasize that close to, as I see it from my perspective now, not in compliance, but close to compliance, and making a good effort at being in compliance with the law. After all, according to executive order, we were supposed to inventory all of National Forest land about, not 2 years ago, but several years ago. And just now are we beginning to start looking for National Forest land. So a problem, particularly with the Forest Service and the cultural resource law affected, is that there is so much land directly under their management. In this region, 12 million acres. Can you imagine? You can just imagine all the archaeologists walking on and doing surveying across 12 million acres of land here. I think it's about 170 million acres of land in the United States, which is under Forest Service management. And again, it is impossible in 1 year, 5 years, or 10 years to survey 187 million or 12 million, 12 million acres of land. So again, it's a matter of seeking and trying to reach a compromise now, and between the strict letter of the law and what can be done given the financial situation, organizational situation, and working every year for greater and greater compliance, and hopefully seeing in 10 years, perhaps, an almost full compliance with cultural resource law as part of it. Now, as you know, looking at the laws, there are 2 main thrusts to cultural resource law. One comes from Executive Order 11593, which calls for an inventory, the inventory order, calls for an inventory of land under an agency's management or ownership. And second, whether or not there's any project planned, it's simply an inventory order generally. The second thrust to cultural resource law calls for at least a survey, a survey prior to a project which disturbs the ground surface, and an evaluation of sites to see if they're eligible for nomination to the National Register. So the survey connected with projects then is the second thrust to cultural resource law as the Forest Service sees it. Now, the problem with both of these is that Congress has not specifically appropriated money to agencies for cultural resource purposes. In other words, the Forest Service has not gotten any money appropriated to them to carry out these legal requirements. So it's a matter when the Forest Service money has to come from, what's already been appropriated for the roads, for the recreation areas, money from fire protection, money from timber that are appropriated for timber sales. Now remember, now contrast this with what I was saying earlier about the line officers everywhere along the line making a contract, that district ranger saying, with this money, I will get out certain amount of board feet of timber. I will build so many roads. And then here he comes, hit with the cultural resource law. Well, before you build these roads, to get that timber out, before you build a landing, the timber landing, and the slides, timber slides, and so on, you have to have this land surveyed. And he says, well, I'm just barely given enough money to do the work to get the timber cut, to get the board feet. And here I have to spend some of that money for cultural resource survey. So you can understand the bind that these people are in. It's that way everywhere along the line, the supervisor's office, in the regional office. So if it seems like the Forest Service, or probably other agencies too, but I can speak to the Forest Service, it seems like they're not jumping out there and doing the cultural resource work. It's because of this kind of bind that they are in. Now, I hope that this is for a short period of time, because we work 3 years ahead in our budget, and we're beginning to factor in the cost of doing cultural resource work, but that's for 3 years from now. And really a problem there too is my being so late, comparatively late in being hired, because the people on the forest, they really didn't, first they didn't know what they had to do to protect archaeological material. Secondly, they didn't know how much it was going to cost. So you get things like for an entire state, what do they have for their cultural resource budget? $5,000. Well, that's just a drop in the bucket of what it's going to take for all of 100 survey of 100 miles of road and so on and so on and so on down the line. So it's going to take more than 3 years before we really get things moving in an acceptable way, but at least things are getting factored in. So the reality of the situation is that the Forest Service is not going to stop all of its other projects. It's not going to stop all of its road building. It's not going to stop all of these projects. You may say, why not? Well, if they did, that's one argument that one can say is, okay, first you've heard of non-utility species. All of a major part of the timber cutting in the forest in Virginia, North Carolina, part of South Carolina, some other states, I can't remember what they are, has been stopped because of a court case. So you may say, okay, well, let's look at all of Region 8, whatever it is, Region 8. If we stop all of the projects, there'll be a lot of time for cultural resources, and there'll be a lot of money, at least this year, to do archaeological surveys. So you're not going to be spending any of that money on any other project. So why don't we just do that? Get it all done in a hurry, and just get inventories, and then we can really manage. It's the first step of management inventory. What would happen is next year Congress would say, by golly, you folks did not cut that board feet, and so on down the line. And if you're not going to do it, we're not going to allocate any more money next year. So we're in a bind in that regard too. We can't simply stop our projects in order to do the cultural resource work. If we do, we won't get any money next year for the Forest Service to run. Now, what has happened then, if you can understand the bind that these people, land managers are in here, what has happened given that situation, given the fact that the forests are more or less autonomous, the state forests in Texas are more or less autonomous in their projects, is that the different forests have taken the projects, or they have taken the position which they feel is best suited to their particular forest in terms of doing the archaeological work. On one forest, for example, they decided that they're going to survey all of the roads that are going to be constructed this year. And they're going to put all of any money for cultural resource, they can sneak a little bit out of here, out of the way this year. Another forest may decide that they want to carry on a technician training program so that the people that dive the bulldozer and engineers and so on can at least recognize materials, cultural materials as they might come across it and call a professional archaeologist. So the different forests then are taking different approaches as to what they're going to do now, sort of on the interim, before we begin to get cultural resource factored into the program. I will hope that in the next few years, in the next 3 years certainly, or working 3 years ahead of time, that we'll get money for the cultural resource survey on land disturbance projects into the budget for the different state offices, the different supervising offices, so that a more realistic estimate of the cost will come out of the supervising office. And I would also hope that in this region we will have some kind of training program in at least several of the states to reach an awareness level for the people who are already employed by the Forest Service, so that when they're out they can begin to recognize cultural resources. The problem that we're going to continue to be in, I think, however, in the Forest Service is that there's not going to be any surplus of funds. And it looks as if it looks, given next year's budget and so on, that no greater amount of funds is likely to come our way either. But I do look to also the hiring of archaeologists at other levels besides the regional office level, although that will depend upon the decisions made by forest supervisors.
Let's do it. I could get intended to unload on y'all for 3 hours with my problem. I won't do that, however. I had 2 purposes in coming here tonight. One was to get your fertile minds and elicit questions from you. Another was to make you aware of some of my problems. But instead of here listening to you, I've revised what I was going to say, and hopefully kind of covered. And I do hope that you get questions out of it. I hope it's beneficial to you, and I hope it's beneficial to me. We'll move pretty fast. I understand that y'all have gone over the Corps of Engineers regulations on cultural resources that was published in the Federal Register September 8th. This year. We won't go into that except in very minor detail. There are a couple of things that I think that are important to point out. From the time we initiate a general investigation study, which results in our survey report that we send to Congress, asking for authorization or recommending no action on a project, it's normally 25 to 30 years before that project is ever constructed. We have ample time. If the archaeological reconnaissance is done at this first stage, we have ample time to get everything plugged into the program and all the pertinent stages of planning that it should be so that it's adequately taken care of. Now, as far as cultural resources management as a word goes, as the title of the seminar, anything else, I'm sure that if you ask the 3 of us here tonight what that even meant, unless we had time to discuss it, we wouldn't come up with the same answer. Most of the seminars, the conferences that you go to today, when you start talking about cultural resources management, you start talking about contracts. Contracts is a very minor part of cultural resources management. Most of our problems today that we have in the Public Law 93-291, where 1% of the project cost or the project program or activity is provided, is authorized to that word. 1% on a project-by-project basis doesn't amount to much. We have some cases right now that senators, the Speaker of the House is involved in, and hopefully we'll get this resolved and we will be able to look at this as an overall part of a operation and maintenance program on a district-wide basis, which does involve several $million, and thereby we can take the money from the overall program and apply it to the most critical needs archaeologically. Unfortunately, we've got 30 existing projects in the Tulsa district alone, and I don't know of a single one that has been inventoried adequately. The work that has been done in the past is only partially done or inadequately done. I know of about 1,250 sites that the Tulsa district alone owns, and I imagine if the sites of the inventory were completed, especially on the projects that were inundated prior to any kind of archaeological survey, I imagine that total would be something on more than 10,000 sites. This is a significant resource base for the future, and even the sites located in the bottoms of the lake are not lost for perpetuity. About 4 years ago, I sent in a request to our Washington office for a research fund on an impact study to determine what the actual effects of artificial inundation were on archaeological sites, and they turned it down at the time, said it was not relevant, something to that effect. And I thought Joe might be interested in knowing that as of about 2 weeks ago, there is a joint federal venture in this. Foreign engineers, I think, is providing most of the money, but the Bureau of Reclamation, the TVA Authority, the National Park Service, and the Corps have implemented this program that I tried to get started a few years ago, and it is well funded over about a 7-year period. Well, obviously, until we know what our problems actually are, we can't solve them. But there are a lot of problems on the surface, archaeologically, that we have that we are trying to do something about. There are many things that can be done to sites other than excavation as a means of mitigation. And I'm of the opinion that not all sites need to be excavated right now. If we've got 2 archaic sites, and after they're tested, and we know the potential pretty well of what those sites are, and if we can do something to preserve one site and excavate the others, if we excavate both sites and we don't receive any additional information other than what we had already obtained from the first site, we reach the point of diminishing returns, we wasted the money, and we collected artifacts and managed professionalism. Kind of professional partnering. And also we destroy the site in the process for any kind of future resource. So we're looking at a number of ways, a number of alternatives of preservation, of conservation efforts for preserving in concert with excavation, of course, as mitigation on our project. In the various stages of planning, the archaeology is done at a much different level. Of course, it always depends on funding. At our general investigation stage, we rarely have enough money to go into any great detail. And also at the general investigation stage, this is a broad brush look at any project area. When Congress tells us to look at an area, to do a feasibility study on it, we might be looking at several 100,000 square miles from a flood control point of view, or from whatever the project purpose is, canal, navigation system, something like that. Then at our phase 1, that results in a phase 1 general design memorandum referred to as one. We do get more site-specific. We begin to weed out the alternatives, and this is where the archaeological survey, which includes testing of all the sites, should be done. And no later than the phase 2 has dug into all the details where you are site-specific as to the project. In each of these cases, the environmental impact statement may or may not be necessary to go forward. The original statement can be updated. But at any rate, if the archaeology is done at the initial stage, there should be no problem in this, and there should be no problem in funding. Most of the funds we are coming up with right now, we're not allocated to archaeology. It won't be until the first of this coming July that we actually receive funds that we've programmed and budgeted for in archaeology. I might mention one thing that I didn't intend to, the way the Corps of Engineers is set up. I think this is probably pertinent to some of your questions. The Corps of Engineers has 38 regions, 13 districts, and 1 chief office. The district engineers are pretty well autonomous. The money comes directly from OMB, Office of Management Budget to the district. The regional, the division offices are set up as an advisory and review process of intermediary between the district and the chief office. District engineer does control the money. The power, in Corps of Engineers is at a district level. In any organization, it's extremely difficult for management to come in for something like archaeology. And archaeology, of course, doesn't rule the world, and it's a minor part of an overall program of whatever the agency's overall authorities are. It's very complicated, as Dee Dee said, to keep up with all the laws and regulations and rules and what maybe that you have to follow. I don't know how many different disciplines we've ever even been involved in the study on a project, but archaeology is only one of them. And it has to be measured, it has to be done to the same degree of level as the other disciplines involved at each stage of planning. When we start construction, which many of you are well aware of, the construction start itself simply means that the Corps has money to start purchasing the property. The real estate purchase comes out of general construction funds, and that's when archaeological mitigation is begin. That's what we're striving for to achieve instead of waiting until a bulldozer starts. Invariably, depending on the size of the project, it's often 2 to 3 or 5 years from the figure to start construction until bulldozers actually start working. Most of the work should be able to be done. That's when we do get most of their money. This is where the 1% comes in. It's authorized under Public Law 92-91. I might mention here, Dee Dee was born on this to explicitly state this, but possibly with the exception of the Antiquities Act of 1906 and Executive Order 11593 of 1971, the other legislation is a permission type thing. Public Law 92-91 authorizes the federal agency to spend this money if they want to. If they don't want to, they can tell the Secretary of the Interior that archaeological remains are going to be affected and it's up to them. And in any case, these public laws, non-compliance with them are subject to the way you cooperate, the cooperation you get from regardless of what federal agency it is, but especially in the Corps of Engineers, is how well you get along with the people involved. Much of the work is done on individual initiatives, individuals in the district that are involved in this very much, and the degree of the program that's carried out is up to them. It's a permission type of thing. Now then, you can stop construction under public law, usually under NEPA. In fact, I think all of the archaeological students that have been involved in civil works projects came as a result of subsidiary to NEPA, not on non-compliance with the executive order. One thing that I might point out that I've encountered recently, you might look into this and see whether you agree or disagree, but in our contracting procedures, I think we go back to all these laws, even though, for instance, the Reservoir Salvage Act of 1960 was superseded by Public Law 1991. They all still have some pertinent pieces of information in it. Under the Antiquities Act of 1906, it gives the Secretary of the Interior the authority to contract with any museum, university, or public institution, not with an individual or an engineering firm or a private firm. Y'all check that and see if I'm not correct. Because right now, I have no objections to contracting with engineering firms if they can demonstrate capabilities. I personally haven't contracted with an engineering firm to do archaeology. They have, in fact, I've held out the archaeology from the other contracts. Normally, for instance, an environmental assessment will give a pretty large contract to a university to do an overall assessment. And I would hold the right in the Tulsa district to keep that separate, and I handle all the contracts separately in that sense. Contracting. I don't know how candid to be with this tonight, but I think it directly involves all of you, or many of you who will be involved in working on contracts with other federal agencies and what have you. As Dee Dee said, under Public Law 93-291, we have the capabilities and the authority to do the work in-house or contract directly or transfer the funds to the Secretary of the Interior or the National Park Service and pay them a 10% overhead and let them administer the contracts. The Park Service administers contracts quite differently than I do, that I attempt to. I might emphasize I've got over 200 projects going that I'm trying to coordinate. I think I've got about 20-something archaeological contracts in the way right now. And I would like to, and I try to go out in the field and see what the problems are and get them to bring me their problems and see what kind of work's going on, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, what have you. So that when I review a report, I'll know what I'm looking at. This is one of my complaints about the interagency archaeological services in the Park Service. With 3 regional offices set up, there is no way that they can properly administer a contract from a regional office like that all over the United States. And as far as cultural resources management itself goes, it's impossible for somebody at the district level in the Corps of Engineers alone to properly administer a management program. In the Tulsa district, we have a regulation that pertains only to the Tulsa district, and it was written prior to passage of Executive Order of Public Law 93-291, so it does need to be revised. But we have 60 people in the Tulsa district involved in the Cultural Resources Management Program. Normally, these are rangers on the projects. They report to me any cases of vandalism, wave shore erosion on sites, anything that we can do, like sowing Bermuda grass seed on a site that's being eroded to protect it, keep people from surface collecting off of it. And it is a purely management program. It's not necessary to have an archaeologist out there, but it does require training of those individuals to be aware of what the problems are and to know who to go to with those problems in order to take care of this from a preservation and management point of view. We have handled our contracts. We've handled this, the actual work 3 different ways. Very minor incidences of personal inspection, and this is always on an emergency type of basis where we do the work in-house. We contract, and we have attempted to transfer funds to the National Park Service. By far, our greatest
greatest success over a 5-year period that we've been doing this. I might point out that for the first 3.5 years that I think we were slightly illegal in doing it as far as public law goes. But at any rate, in this 5 years, our best success has been by direct contracting with institutions to get the work done and get it done timely. And Al can tell you that I think that whoever is administering a program like this, it's to their benefit to know the people personally that are doing the work, and be on a good enough and a sound enough basis that you can criticize each other. Not just who's controlling the money, criticizing the work that's done, but I expect when I'm doing something wrong on a contract or in the administration, I expect the archaeologist, the principal investigator to tell me that he doesn't like the way I'm handling something, we ought to work it out. When you get to the point that you can't communicate between each other, then you've really got a problem. This is a problem internally in any federal agency, especially in archaeology. Archaeology is new to most of these people, and they have little or no appreciation for it in many cases. Another concept that's slightly different than mine in cultural resources management is that I think we ought to get the public more involved. For example, in the morning I'm speaking to a Chamber of Commerce in Skytook, Oklahoma, to try to get them to push us in developing an interpretive center on a project that I've recommended, trying to get support for that. Last week I talked to a 7th grade class, and you'd be surprised how interested, how perceptive, and how responsive grade school kids are to archaeology. And maybe by the time, if this public education system goes along good enough, maybe by the time they get up to college level, we'll be able to cope with many of our archaeological problems better than we are at present. I'll close just here, gentlemen. Sorry. Don't worry. One thing that I do want to emphasize here, in 1979, Congress is going to take another look at Public Law 95291. They're going to take a look at the program. They're going to take a look at the money spent and archaeology done, decide whether or not it's worth prolonging. Last week we pulled a Plains Conference. At any rate, I was asked to be a discussion on the Park Service's Cultural Resource Management Program. I had some very pointed remarks to make, and I think this is very pertinent. I think the Park Service is falling very short, more so than other federal agencies. The Corps of Engineers has a lot of problems, and I'll be the first to admit it. And like Dee Dee said, I don't know of any federal agency that's in full compliance with any of these laws, but I can't understand the Park Service's inability to get cranked up and get going on this program. I think if we proceed in the next year and a half like we have in the past year and a half, I think Congress is going to cut it out. We've got a report that was sent in that was not done with our money, even though it was on one of our projects, Park Service money. The report was accepted at face value, and I think the contract was for something on the order of $40,000, and the report conclusion said that because of the limited nature of projects related to archaeology, there was not broad enough information available to make valid interpretations on the work that was done, and consequently making interpretations on the work resulting from that contract was a fruitless effort. When you put yourself in the shoes of a congressman or a senator, and you look at the money that's spent on that contract, and you look at the results, and decide whether or not you think archaeology is worth spending money on. And this is not an isolated case. There are many, many cases like this. And I know personally of about half a dozen projects right now where congressmen and senators are involved in these. They're taking a very close look at what's being done and what isn't being done. And I, for one, think archaeology is well worth doing. I've been involved in it some extent or other since I was 10 years old. And I think the information that archaeology has is well worth the public knowing about. I think the archaeologists in the past have kind of neglected and left the public at large out. This is another thing that the Forest Service is required. This is not authority to do it, but under Public Law 93-291, the Secretary of the Interior is required to publish annually the results of the archaeological investigations done by every federal agency within that year. To my knowledge, they're not making an attempt to do that. I think the public should be more involved, and I think if archaeology goes much farther than it is, it's going to take some public support. And at least it's going to take some support by politicians. We have a number of very interesting case studies going on right now where politicians are involved, and I think archaeology is going to come out on top. I can't, of course, I've only get a very few highlights here. As I said, I did come prepared to talk for 3 hours, but I was going to go into some of the problems and discuss these in detail with you, let you ask me questions. And I thought about giving you a problem and asking you what you do in certain situations, and put the shoe on the other foot, maybe. As Dee Dee said, you get an entirely different perspective working in a federal agency that is authorized to carry out some specific job by Congress. I'll keep thinking of other things to add on, but one thing that I do want to add here that's totally separate, that you may or may not be aware of it, under other public laws that don't even pertain to archaeology. Under the Rivers and Harbors Act of 1889, the Corps of Engineers was given the responsibility for all navigable waters in the United States. In South Carolina last year, the Corps of Engineers was sued by a conservation group effort on the premise that we were not adequately controlling pollution in a navigable stream. So it went to court. Now, this stream was not a navigation system and what have you, but it went to court. The federal judge ruled that any stream that has a flow 50% of the time or more of 5 cubic feet per second, which I realize that cubic feet per second may be a little bit hard for y'all to visualize, that any stream that has ever been navigated with any type of craft by anybody for any distance for any purpose is a navigable stream, and all the tributaries there to are navigable. Well, under this Section 404 permit, if you request a permit to conduct an archaeological excavation, if you dump into the stream, if you wash the samples, if you water stream the samples, and you dump more than 5 cubic feet of dirt into that stream, you have to have a Section 404 permit from the Corps of Engineers. If a farmer builds an outhouse, and in digging his latrine under the outhouse, if he takes that spoil and dumps it into the stream, he has to have a permit from the Corps of Engineers. The Corps of Engineers has fought this, and it's going to cost millions of dollars to implement. It's ridiculous. It can't be implemented. And the Corps of Engineers has been going around holding meetings all over the country on this. And in order to get a Section 404 permit clearance, it requires an archaeological reconnaissance. That's correct. So all of you get teared up and go out to the Farmer Jones outhouse. But I understand that there are now 3 bills in Congress trying to pass some legislation that will change this court ruling. But as of right now, that is in effect. And under a Section 10 permit, which Section 4, paragraphs A through D of Public Law 93-291 specifically deal with, this is a licensing and permitting program. The Section 10 under the Rivers and Harbors Act gives the Corps the authority to doing this. If somebody puts in a pipeline over a navigable stream, that requires an archaeological reconnaissance wherever that thing touches down and affects something. And it may or may not require an environmental statement to be prepared. So the Section 10 and the Section 404 permits are very applicable to archaeological reconnaissance. We're having some of our biggest passings right now with the not Secretary of the Interior, the National Park Service. They say that's not their responsibility, but Section 4 of the Public Law 93-291 expressly says that is the responsibility to give an archaeological clearance to decide what is to be done on private property. Now, this applies, these permits are not on federal property, not on poor property, but on private property or any other property. And that Section 4 of Public Law 93-291 deals expressly with this. And the National Park Service has said it's not their responsibility, and the Corps of Engineers has no authority to fund anything like that. So there are some interesting cases going on with that right now. If you would like, I'll send some brochures to Al explaining the Section 10 and Section 404 permit program, and y'all can pass them around and hassle over them. And, before you get through hassling over them, it may be rescinded, but I think it will give you something to think about. Thank you.
I'm sure it makes it easy to follow two distinguished speakers that cover the subject so well that there's just nothing left to say when you get up here. However, I thought I would, I thought I would see if I can explain to you about how the SCS is set up, and a few comments about some of the way that archaeology and SCS is tied together nowadays. Soil Conservation Service is an agency of the Department of Agriculture. At the very top, of course, is the President, and underneath him, the Secretary of Agriculture. And then the SCS has an administrator who is directly reports to the Secretary. The next step, some of these other, like I say, y'all have regions and what have you. The SCS is a little bit more simplified than that because underneath the administrator and 2 or 3 deputy administrators, they come directly to the state. The state conservation in each state. We happen to have a brand new one in Texas right now. His name is George Mark. The old one, the one that we just got rid of, we didn't really get rid of him because the rest went to war. And he's about the number 2 man, I guess it is. He is Mark. Underneath under the authority of state conservation, each state is divided into a number of areas. Texas is divided into 25 areas. Each area is made up of a number of counties, which averages around 10 or 12 counties. And then each area has an area conservation who answers directly to the state conservation. Then within the areas, each area is broken down into a number of districts, conservation districts. The district lines are not always the same as county lines. In fact, some have a number of counties, some have a county and a half, sometimes it gets a little mixed up. But anyway, the district has a district conservation who administers the SCS business of his district. He answers then to the area conservation on that state. The only thing we have in the way of a region is regional technical service centers, which there's one here in Fort Worth, and 3 others scattered throughout the United States, but they are strictly service. They don't have any, they don't get any funds that we can get from them or anything like that. They're strictly up there to try to work out problems that you might have at the state level and coordinate programs, and they're more of anyway, they help when you have any kind of a problem that you think be more, I don't know why they have these things. But anyway, we get our funds directed from Congress. It doesn't go through a region. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It comes directed to the state. Each state has to work out a budget every year. We don't get some funds, I think, like Dee Dee. If I understood Dee Dee right, you get some funds and then you decide, within that area what you're going to do with the funds. Our budgets are more or less line item budgets. It has to be worked out ahead of time that we're going to do this and such, and this is what it's going to cost. Then you go to Congress and present your case, and you hope you get half of it. Sometimes you don't. And, of course, like the others ahead of me said, archaeology is at the very bottom of the stack right now. In fact, in SDS, I guess it's, we're probably newer in archaeology than either of your two organizations, I'm sure. Because we've only been involved in archaeology for about the last year and a half or 2 years since NEPA came into effect. And we've only had an archaeologist working for the service since January of this year. Another thing that's unique about the service, about SDS, is that SDS does not own or administer any land. We don't have any federal land that belongs to the SDS. All of our projects are carried out on private property. The nearest that we get to controlling land is that in a watershed project, say if you're going to build a dam, we take an easement on the property that's going to be involved in the dam for maintenance. In other words, we don't own the land, we don't have a deed to it, it still belongs to the landowner. And just in the last few years, there have been some cases where the sponsors of the project, any watershed project, it's not really an SDS project. There is a local watershed district set up made of the people that live there in the area, that own land in the area. They are the ones who decide whether or not they really want the project there. Generally, if they decide that they want a project after SDS has gone out there and surveyed the area, that here, use one here, use one there, and it's so expensive, then the local people sit down and decide whether they want this project. If they decide that they do, then they form a watershed control and improvement district. It has a board of directors and it has the power of taxation and whatever. So the local sponsoring organization is actually the one who takes an easement on the land or who, in certain cases, condemns the land. If they decide that the project is so important that it's going to benefit so many people that one guy up here holding out is really working to the detriment of all others, they can condemn the land and go ahead and take, I think, 2 simple finance. But the local organization sponsors are the ones who decide not to condemn. The only 2 areas that SDS is involved with archaeology is in their watershed program and in RCD program, which the Resource Conservation and Development Project program, which we call RCD, is a kind of a latecomer. They've been working on these things, I believe, about 6 or 7 years. What it amounts to is a number of counties, it has to be multiple counties, a number of counties get together and decide that they have a conservation problem, either flooding or erosion or what have you, a number of things. They decide that they have this problem, and they get busy and form an RCD project of these 4 counties. Then they come to the SDS and request technical assistance from our agency to inventory the land, to tell them what we feel like to be the best way to take care of these problems, and once they get all the paperwork and everything done, we can get started. There is a certain amount of additional federal funds to be put into that area because it does have that Archaeology project, because people have farmed and decided that they're going to try to take care of that farm. They get extra funds, and they get also extra technical assistance from the agency. So in those two areas, and within RC&D areas, the only way the archaeology is looked into right now is in water-based recreation. How they ever came up with that, I don't know. But what it amounts to is you got to have some kind of a project like dam, pond, lake, something along the seashore that has to do with water-based recreation. And in those areas, an archaeology is part of the environmental assessment. When you do the environmental assessment, archaeology is involved. And the other area, like I said earlier, is on watershed program. The main function of the small watershed program in Texas is flood prevention. In the past few years, there's been a little more emphasis on recreation, on municipal water supply, and wildlife and fish and wildlife. But like I said earlier, the main thing I think, the main difference between the agency and the approach that we take to archaeology is that SES is not involved in federal land. They're not working on federal property anytime like that. They're working on private property. And a lot of the guidelines that have been put out to date have not dealt, we don't feel like they've dealt sufficiently with the problem of working on privately owned land. Just this past week, got a copy of a letter from the state conservation in Colorado, answering the letter. Some of you may belong to the Society of Conservation Archaeology. It was reprinted in their newsletter. He had received a letter from I believe the president of the Conservation Society, the associate Society of Conservation Archaeology, asking why it was that SPS did not go ahead and do a reconnaissance survey of the entire area to be involved in the watershed project, in the planning project. And the first thing, of course, is that we don't feel like it's required by law because, well, for one thing, our lawyers in Washington have taken the stance that that's not the way it has to be at that particular stage. And the second thing is that the SDS feels like if we were to have to do archaeological survey in the entire area, that we would be actually getting involved with land use, telling a man, you've got to do this and so with your land because it's in this watershed area, even though it may be in the further streets of the watershed and really not going to be affected by the project. The only thing is that some of the rain that falls on his land eventually is going to run into a lake or something in that project. So it's quite involved, and right now the guidelines, as far as I can see them anyway, are really not too clear. There's going to have to be a lot of talking and a lot of work done at Washington level to see like to get things straightened out before we'll know for sure exactly what all the different agencies are going to have to do. To get right down to the archaeology in SDS, at the present time we're contacting practically all of our archaeologists. And as far as I can see, whatever my opinion was, in the foreseeable future, I don't believe that SDS is going to become involved in in-house archaeology to a very great extent. For one thing, Alan and I and the rest of us talked about earlier today, the curatorial end of it would be terrible. After a while, SDS would have to build a museum somewhere to put all the artifacts, or a warehouse. There's a lot of land that's a warehouse. And I just don't feel like SDS is going to want to get involved in something like that. Besides that, our project are smaller nature, unless the laws are changed or unless someone looks at them and says, you're not doing it right, you're going to have to do it this way. At the present time, our projects are fairly small. Also, at the present time, we're working on sketches. We are working on projects that were already in the bill, and some of them already under construction with these sketches. And so what we're doing is going back and doing an archaeological survey on those that are already under construction. Some of them are, usually some of them anyway, are finished before we get to recording. But if we ever get past that stage, if we ever get caught up, get all of those projects surveyed and get them behind us, when we get into the planning stage of a watershed, early enough in the game, it'll go just like Larry is saying with their project. We'll plan a watershed project, and it'll be, some of them right now are 12 and 15 years old and haven't had a single structure started. They're still in the planning process. So if we can ever get caught up with the work that's going on now, that's already been started, then we feel like that we can do a proper job through contract to in the initial stages of planning. All that's required is actually a record search at the initial stage. And if anything shows up at the next stage of planning, reconnaissance is called for. And then when you get right down to building a structure, under our present guidelines, we are having an environmental assessment made, including archaeology in the entire east area. In other words, everything that's going to be involved in the construction of dam and spillway and the impoundment of water in town. See, I've got 18 pages low. I was going to say something real good. Oh, on landscape archaeology. They got in ahead of us too. The SDS has 3 landscape architects, and one of them is at the Warren level. So we got caught looking back. Another thing that Dee Dee brought out that I was going to bring out, and she did it again, was that one of the reasons that the SDS decided that they would try to find someone who was already familiar with the bureaucratic system, so to speak, instead of hiring someone who was strictly an academic archaeologist, so to speak, was that it's a traumatic experience for us to come in out of the field and go work for a federal agency. Because things are just not exactly what you have been reading in the papers and hearing the mailman tell you on some steps about the federal government. The SES didn't feel, and after talking to a number of people in the field of archaeology, they talked to a lot of people, including Allen and Alpha Briggs and some of the others. They really didn't feel that you could take a pure archaeologist and drop him into the SES and expect anything coordinated to come out of it for a number of years. And they were in the situation where they were doing contract archaeology already. They were getting reports piled up in the state office there, and they had an economist summarizing reports, trying to write up environmental assessments. So they needed somebody right away. And I don't look for them to put anybody else on the state staff. Now, what I do look for in the SDS is in the other states, they're going to have somebody. Because I've talked to a number of people in the archaeological community and also in the SDS from other states. Just this past week, the Deputy State Conservation from Arkansas was in Temple. And after the program, I told him, I said, I sure would like to talk to you about how y'all are doing archaeology in Arkansas. He said, boy, I've got to get the airplane. He said, I'd love to talk to you about it. But he said, I've got to catch this airplane. And said, the only thing I'll comment is that we have very little to do with archaeology, and he says what we have done is things. He said they don't have any way of coordinating between the agencies. There's nothing in between. There's an archaeologist and there's a village name. There's nothing in between. And it's just not too good. And I had talked earlier with a lady from Kentucky who was doing the contract archaeology for it. And she said you spend 70 or 80% of your time in Kentucky trying to run down the landowners, trying to get the maps together. The SCS evidently doesn't do anything in Kentucky except send out a contract and say, go do some archaeology for them. And then the archaeologists have to get busy and get permission from the landowners. They have to go to the local district conservationist and get the maps from him, and then try to find the piece of land out there, and it's just not too good. So actually, we're fortunate, I think, in Texas, because we have gotten started early enough in the game that we're benefiting actually by being able to get a hold of some of these other people and find out what their problems are, and we can kind of work around those problems. And they, of course, not have anybody on their staff, they go right on with the problems. It's kind of a next thing that we're hoping it's all going to work out in the end. One thing about training in SDS, we've talked about it quite a bit at the local level, at the state level, I mean. And we're going to try to work out some type of training program for the employees. However, we're thinking that not actually having them do archaeology is not what we're interested in, because we still plan to contact practically all of our archaeologists. But what the stage that we feel like we need the most help in is right out there where the bulldogs work. And the man that we have, Johnny on the spot sort of a fella, is construction inspector. On every one of our watershed projects, there's a construction inspector assigned to that particular project. And he's there every day that the construction contractors are there. He's the go-between between the contractors and the SDS. He's the man that's going to be there if they happen to run across something below the surface of the bulldozer. He's the one that has to know what to look for and who to contact. So, I'm in the process of working out some type of training program to get these inspectors together, maybe only 4 or 5 of them at a time, so there's a number of mistakes. Get them together and give them some type of an insight into what to look for, who to contact. And the hard thing about most of them is that most of them have been working for the service a long time. They're used to the bulldozer mentality. They like to see dirt floating around, roll those big old rocks with those machines. And they don't like to stop those machines for these little old piles of flint, you know. So we've got to try to change their attitude. And some of them it's going to be hard, I'm sure, but some of them are going to retire one of these things. Maybe we'll get some new ones in there. But right now, the watershed planning parties, which there's only 2 in the state, we plan to do some work with training them so that when they're out training watersheds and getting around over the scenery, they can sort of give us an insight into whether or not there's something out there pretty early in the game. And others on construction inspectors, which we feel like they really need some training in archaeology so they can stay abreast of what they're carrying out there.
Let's take about 5 minutes, and then we'll take relatively straight story here tonight. Do you all have any specific questions of interest to you specifically, or project-wise, or wherever, that you want to direct anybody here? No.
Let me just sort of direct this in general to the three speakers and ask them how soon you feel close compliance to the law will come about. What time frame are we talking about? You mentioned that you never really expect the Forest Service to be in total compliance. What about getting close to being within the law? And what is this going to involve?
And that's in terms of 11.593 and NEPA 2, in which we've got to keep up with what we're doing, as well as we've got to start catching up on our inventory. We've got both of these areas.
When you start thinking of the inventory, I really think we are thinking of maybe a couple of decades. What I look for is, what I try to think of in terms of planning this region, the Forest Service archaeological program, is what we might see 2 years from now, 3 years, 5 years, and then I start thinking 7 years and 10 years. I'm not beyond thinking 10 years. But I would say at least 10 years, which seems like an awful long amount of time. But if we started thinking what the laws are, and also with the government agency, even for a short time, to see how it works. If it's more to see how it works.
Now that 10 years is a bad idea. Mr. Larry, how many new starts do you follow to get to that? Well, I'm thinking within 25 or so. Country? I don't know. Yeah, of course, when we start, they must be cutting back. We really are. In fact, the days of the big dam building are over for two reasons. Primarily, most of the major dam sites that are good sites, for site selection, you have to meet some pretty rigid criteria to be able to put a dam where you put a dam. Most of the major dam sites have already been selected and put in, and the Corps of Engineers is pushing floodplain management, non-structural alternatives of solving flood protection and needs. And I think with now one thing that is going to be a coming factor, and this, in my point of view, has one of the most detrimental effects on archaeological sites with the energy shortage. Even where we don't have dams with power, we do have a dam there. Those dams were designed with very little bit of effort. Those dams can be heightened, and hydroelectric turbines can be put in. They can be converted to power. Well, the physical criteria on a lake itself has a lot to do with the impacts of archaeology, and simply because of fluctuation. If you're operating a lake at a fairly normal conservation pool, you have a minimal amount of effect except for a couple of specific zones within the lake. But when you operate it for power, that conservation pool fluctuates up and down day by day. And it literally cuts anything to pieces that's on the shoreline within that area. It's a disastrous effect on archaeology. I think with the energy shortage, this is going to cause some new projects. Now, when you say projects, this would include this type of thing. Would be included. Yes, sir. Now, another thing, this makes it pretty far-fetched. Y'all, you may or may not be aware of it. I worked in hydrogeology for a while, and I attended a seminar, a 2-week seminar at the University of California, Davis, in 1969, looking at water resource problems. At that time, they were projecting that within 15 years, western Kansas, West Texas, eastern Colorado, up through along the front range of the mountains, that area was going to be virtually without water in 15 years because of the dropping water table. The Texas water plant, for example, it hasn't passed or anything. It was part of the reason for taking water back now out to Lubbock. Right now in Oklahoma, there are drastic, a lot of plans going on, a lot of politicians involved, trying to get a water conveyance system to western Oklahoma. The same thing is going on in all these states. And I really don't know what the name is. I don't know what it would be. But the water conveyance system alone for southern Oklahoma there, we have 5 alternate or 5 potential routes of canals 255 miles in length. Now this was a general investigation study that we're starting on. Well, we don't even know specifically where one route would be yet. And yet we were required to do the archaeology for the environmental assessment. You know, if we come up with something. I took 30% of the actual route, as near as we could tell, of one route. We took 30% of it based on biological ecotomes and contact between physiographic problems, look at archaeology, and then just so we can come up with a predictive model of what we can expect on the different routes. I don't know that, I doubt that will ever be economically feasible because by the time you get the water from southeast Oklahoma out there, it really costs a lot. Now the problem in that area is that the water table is dropping so fast that the artesian irrigation systems that they have been using are going to be above water. And another problem is that there is no artificial recharge. We're apparently having some climatic changes. For instance, there in eastern Oklahoma, in 1973 at Lake Western, the average annual rainfall there was 34 inches a year. In 1973, we had 72 inches. 1974, we had 68 inches. And we're way above normal right now. And yet in the western part of the state, they have drought. And there is no natural recharge of these aquifers that have been supplying the water for the irrigation system up there. And another problem that complicates matters there, irrigation itself increases the salinity of the soil because the soluble minerals dissolve and run off when it's irrigated, you know. And consequently, the natural salts that are there increase in percentage to the soluble minerals that have been run off, and a lot of the soil is being ruined too. So this is one of the problems to look at, but archaeology, of course, would be involved in any of these plans. We're maybe talking about extending navigation routes to Oklahoma City and up to Wichita, Kansas. All sorts of things. I don't think those will ever come fast. In fact, the Corps killed one. I hope we killed it. But these things, even another important thing, a change that came about last year. In the past, when the Corps of Engineers, when Congress authorized a project, there was never a deauthorization. When a project was put on the books, 50 years ago, there may have been a specific need then. And by the time Congress gets around to doing something right now, that need and that purpose for which it was authorized may be totally irrelevant today. So last year, the Water Resources Council in Washington that does control the water resources development put out their guidelines, and they said from now on, any project that is authorized by Congress, if funds are not spent on it in some stated planning or other, if funds are not spent on it within 5 years, it is automatically deauthorized. And consequently, the work, if it does come up again, it has to be reauthorized and the work started immediately. Now, if we did the archaeological reconnaissance on one of these projects in general investigation stage of study, within 5 years, that might be killed totally. So So whenever it did start up again, the archaeology itself had to be reevaluated. But in the meantime, if you were planning on some kind of program of federal funds for that project, if they didn't come through, the money wouldn't be there for archaeology.
What kind of people? How does it actually, has anything actually been reauthorized?
Sir?
Has any project actually been reauthorized?
Yes, sir. We cut out 50% of this year. In fact, the board has had to carry dead weights on the books for years, and it was like beating a dead horse, having everything around.
When did you overcome the land
Now that we also did construction. We also, in fact, the laws that are pertinent to this also apply to lands that we have jurisdiction or control over. And that's why we're involved in this permit section, even though it's on private property, because we do have a jurisdiction over this type of activity. We have flowing easements, flood control easements on a lot of properties we don't own, but we maintain that the laws do apply in this case. Thank you, archaeology.
Well, the early days of the project, both far around the mural, anything, they were state title in the past. That's the outside.
Yes.
Do we still do that, or what you just said, taking the place?
No, we still do that. In fact, you may or may not be aware, the Tulsa District bought the Deer Creek site, Spiral Mounds, and Craig Mound has been reconstructed now, it's about a month ago. But we have bought a number of archaeological sites that are peripheral to our project simply for the defense and for development of the country.
The only time I've been inspired, because of their imagination.
Yes, well, it really wasn't all that impressive. But, we've had a number of hassles in that too. In fact, I have thought to mention that, but as far as management programs go, the hassles that we got into in trying to do something to preserve and protect and develop an archaeological site is amazing. Our involvement with the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation and National Park Service didn't want to have anything to do with it. And of course, the Corps kind of stuck their necks out because it was back in the 60s when we bought that. We didn't have any authority to buy anything like that. And it's been a hassle. And I think it's well worth the hassle, though.
Well, there's a good, as far as I know, the CPA had no authority whatever to do all that stuff, they did good. It really started the whole thing. I don't think they had an iota of authority. It just fired and made the left to let that stuff go underwater.
This is the thing. A lot of times, in a federal agency like this, if you've got enough support at a district level, you can go ahead and get a lot of things done. And when the division officer, district officer, Washington officer comes up, that's about all they can say is you should have done that. Now the fact that it's already done.
Well, back in 1946, back in the annual, people said, well, we can't do anything for you, but we probably should work with the district officers. Anything you can arrange with them, it's okay with that.
But they didn't want to know about it. Get back to your question. I think ours will be about 2 years. These regulations that came out, those regulations are written to incorporate all and to be legally in compliance with all of the existing legislation. The thing came out as an EC, which is an action document. It's called an engineering circular. It will be in effect for a year, and then we will revise it. We'll work with it for a year and try to iron out the bugs and see what works and what doesn't, and then publish it as a regulation. And it is virtual law for the Corps of Engineers. And if you notice that paragraph right in the first, it said that each district, division, and division engineer shall staff for this to carry out this work in a competent and professional manner. And in many cases, this will require hiring professional archaeologists on the staff. Without telling them to do it, it was about as close as we could do without telling them what to do. I'd like to introduce Susan Hazen to you, the young lady in red over here. She's in the Fort Worth district. She's there 2 weeks. 3. If you're interested in names, I'll call out the names to get the other Corps archaeologists if you're interested. If you're not, I won't. I think we do have about 16 now that have been hired since these regulations were passed. Okay. We've got an anthropologist and an archaeologist in San Francisco. We have a district archaeologist in Seattle, one in Portland. We have 2 in St. Paul, one in Vicksburg, one in Louisville, one in Huntington, West Virginia, and Stephen in Fort Worth. And I work in kind of a peculiar capacity. I work for the division here as well as 5 districts. So I couldn't say that each one of them had an archaeologist, but I do work for them. I do have charge numbers there, charge time. And several others are trying to hire archaeologists. About half of those have been hired as women. You young ladies are interested in that kind of information. Discrimination. Discrimination in reverse.
Just hiring the most capable applicants.
What can you expect when an old hairy-legged boy and a good-looking young girl goes up with equal qualifications on paper and says, you want an archaeologist? About 25 years ago, this is normal. That's typical. Now, in many cases, this can change. Let me give you a typical example. We had a project that was authorized in 1968, and they kind of dilly-dallied around with it. And in 1972, I had an archaeological survey done, fortunately, and we didn't expect construction to start. We didn't anticipate anything at all on the near future. And now these stages of planning that are described in this regulation, published in the Federal Register, this is the normal sequence of this. And what I'm talking about is abnormal. But Congress appropriated construction funds for that, and they expect construction to start next year, and we don't even have our phase 2 GDN out yet. So I've got to get the archaeological survey. We make a distinction between reconnaissance and survey. The survey includes testing and development of the mitigation program. And last time, according to the guidelines, phase 1 well, reconnaissance is just searching, discovering, looking for sites, whatever you get the highlight. Because we're never site specific at that stage. Now then, when we get to the phase 2 GDM, we do have a definite project area in mind. And we can look at this area and say, okay, this is the area that will be impacted. So if you go in and you test the sites and it requires additional survey. But it requires testing of the sites too. And then, as a result of that, the mitigation plan is developed to be incorporated with our phase 2 GDM that we look at hopefully before you get to construction had several years, or at least 2 years,